Hello, welcome to KarenSukiArts, and this is my tutorial for beginners. This will be on turned loops. Turned loops are very handy. You can put your beads together with them. You could also connect them to earrings. You can put lobster clasps on them. Uh, Basically, this is one of the most necessary skills you need to develop when you're making your own jewelry. And first, let's discuss about wire. Right here, I have a piece of 28 gauge wire. This is not the gauge of wire that you want to make turn loops from. It turns, it twists, it unbends. It's very flexible. There's great things to do with this wire, but turned loops will not work with this wire. I also have 24 gauge, and it's a little thicker, but it's still not stiff enough to hold your beads in place. My favorite wire gauge for turned loops is a 20 gauge. It's nice and flexible, but it is stiff enough that it will, when you bend it, it will stay in place. This is artistic wire. Copper wire is good. There's a whole bunch of good wire types to use for this. I ended up with a spool of 20 gauge aluminum wire, and as you can see, you can bend it, you can unbend it, you can make different forms in it. It squishes. This will not hold your beads in place when you make your piece of jewelry. You can use a thicker gauge. This is a 16 gauge. I would use this for big clunky beads, not anything that a 20 gauge can go through. This will hold your wire if you were going to do a very durable piece like an anklet, but it might almost be too heavy. So I would just choose your gauge of wire for the size of bead you're going to use. Okay. Today I have some turquoise glass beads. And the first step that you do is make sure your bead fits onto your wire. If it doesn't, either pick a little bit smaller wire, because there is 21 gauge, 22 gauge, or choose another bead. Okay, so now the tools you're going to need are your beads, your wire. You will need a pair of wire cutters. These are flush cutters. They cut a little rough on this side, they cut flat here. The nice feature about this is these tips can go into almost any place you need something snipped. Nice and tight. You don't need a lot of clearance to cut your wire with these. Your other tool you're going to need, I'll show you these. These are round nose pliers. Okay, this is the pair that came in my original kit. I bent the tip of my round nose pliers because when I first started, I was playing around bending steel wire. Just because it was cheap and something to practice on. But I bent my tip. And that sort of bugs me. I can still get a nice turned wire with these, but I usually use these when I'm crabbing, and I don't care if I drop them in the ocean. I won't cry too much. This is my favorite pair. Nice steel forged, made by Cousin. I know there's several other brands that are out there. This is actually a 3-in-1 tool. You get your round nose pliers, your flat nose, and some cutters. I don't use these cutters very often because you need a lot of room to get in there and snip away. So let's jump into the tutorial part. Okay, step 1, put your bead on your wire. These particular beads here are ceramic with glass over top of them. So getting this powdery stuff is normal. Alright, first you grab your wire at the tip right here at your desired width of wire. I'm using the big one because I want the loops bigger for the video. Run your finger across here. If you can feel the wire sticking out like this, you're going to have a scratchy spot in your turned loop, and you're going to have to figure out how to trim that after you're done. So make sure your wire is firmly down into the middle of your clippers, or your round nose. Turn your hand over, put your wire in there. Now roll your wire or your hand towards you while this finger is pushing your wire up against your round nose. And you'll make it about halfway to 3/4 of the way around. Open your pliers, keep your pliers in your loop. Turn it so you can grasp it again at the top, and keep rolling forward until this end touches the shaft of the wire. Okay? You can possibly, if you go too far, like that would be too far, just simply go back in, ease off a little bit, reposition it, and touch. Okay? Now take the little ends, stick them between right here in your loop, as close to where the wire touches as possible, and turn your wire, just kink it away from you a little bit. That's not quite 45 degrees, but what you're after, I just don't want to turn, you are after your loop on a mostly straight shaft here. Okay? And then just fiddle around a little bit, make sure that touches, then bring your bead up to your turned loop. Okay? Next, put your little tips of your round nose right here at the end of the bead and kink it 90 degrees. Okay? You do not want this kink right next to the bead because that will cause your bead to break. Put your wire or your round nose on your wire right there where you have the other loop situated. Right like that. Okay, you want your hand all the way around. Now start to roll, pushing the wire against your round nose. Reposition and keep turning. Now this time you're going to take the wire and go all the way around, just like this. You're after an overlap right there. Okay? So take your flush cutters, turn them so the flat side will cut this wire that's connected to the bead. Go right into the tip, like that, and snip it. Okay? So now you have a closed loop on this end and an open loop on this end. Now occasionally you'll come out with your loops facing the same direction. If that happens, all you have to do is take your round nose, grasp your wire, hang on to this end firmly, either with pliers or your fingers, and just turn. So now you have your loop facing this way and your loop facing that way. The way you want these to face is totally up to you. It just depends on the piece of jewelry you're making. Now, to connect your beads, I prefer them to face in opposite directions, like this. So what we'll do now is, this is a thicker side of the bead, this is thinner, so we will match it up to pick the side. To connect your beads, you take your open loop here, your closed loop here, and slide it on like that. Take your round nose and gently tease your loop so it touches like that. And then you look and you see it's not quite straight, so you straighten it out a little bit. You can use your fingers too. Take the ends and sort of go like this. This helps work harden your wire so it will stay put a little better. You come around here, check your other end. Always double check, make sure they're in there good, because the worst thing that could happen is you could be running along the beach and the two seams match up and boop, it falls apart and you lose it. So that is how you put your beads together using a turned wire loop. And once you get enough done for a bracelet, you just put a lobster clasp on one end and use that loop, and you have a complete piece of jewelry. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. If you liked it, please hit the like button. I will be doing more. I will be back with another video soon with how to put a lobster clasp on this and make this a complete bracelet. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.